My first day at Sunset, I had been placed in the women's choir,
Hmm.
and so it was first period. So I walk in and I'm like stoked because like musicals have always been my thing.
Hmm.
I did musicals in Seattle on stage, like big stages and things like
Wow.
that. So like I really was like stoked to be a part of a choir because I hadn't actually been in a choir before. So the first day he's like asking us questions and he's watching my hand like shoot up every
Mm.
question. And so at the end of class he like asked me, he was like, so what's the story here? And I was like, and I explained my history, and so he moved me up to the choirs. But that first day Alicia Knox was sitting by me. Well, that's not
Oh
her.
yes, her. Yes. Okay. No, I
That's
got
not
it.
her last name now. She's married, but
Yep. Yep.
it was, and she was sitting like either like next to me or like two down,
Hmm.
and she was so bubbly, and I was so nervous, and I'm pretty bubbly, like I talk to people all the time. So, and I was like nervous, and I was pretty quiet, and I
Yeah.
didn't know anyone. I mean, I went into that blind,
Hmm.
and so the only people I knew in town was my mom and her boyfriend. So,
Hmm.
yeah, so I went into a blind and met her, and they kind of adopted me in their little group. And then, but they were seniors, and so then I had to start over the next year. But I had luckily, there's so many people that I made friends with in choir that I was ready to find other cliques.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So now I have to ask, because like musical movies, like let's say The Greatest Showman, or
mhm.
yeah, I guess I don't want to say Phantom of the Opera. I'll say Les Miserables.
Mhm.
Out of all those kinds of like musical movies that become big of these last like 5 or so years, when you joined, and also I guess Broadway, when you joined the choir and you talked about musicals, was there one where you're like, I'm pounding the table, I want to do this one, let's do this one?
Um, I have had a love for Greece my whole entire
Oh,
life.
yeah,
When I lived in Seattle, so I was in this program that like so your parents like pay for it, but you're part of a musical, and like you still try out and like have a part, like it's still a full-blown thing, but they have to pay because of like it's at a nice theater, and like
sure.
we have really nice, clothing and things like that. So my parents did this. I think I decided in third grade, and our first musical was Grease. So I was like,
Oh,
but the whole cast was pretty much older, and
yeah,
so I was one of the youngest. So I was just like a backup person.
yeah.
And then the year before I moved, so my sophomore year of high school, we did it again,
Hmm.
got brought back, and I got to be like one of my like all-time favorite roles. It is my all-time favorite role. I got to be Jan, who in the movie she's not as big of a role, but in the musical she's kind of always around when the Pink Ladies are around.
Mm.
But yeah, so that was the one where I was like, that's the one I wanted to do. I also wanted to do Wizard of Oz, but
Hmm.
that's okay.
Yeah.
I got to do The Wiz though. That was really cool.
Hmm.
And the theater that we did it in was round, like completely. So it's round, and then like people are like up, like so they're looking at you like this,
Yeah, yeah.
and you're
At,
down
a,
on the.
at like yeah, a downward angle and whatnot. Yeah.
And it was so hard, but like the tornado scene was so cool. We used white umbrellas and white flags.
Oh.
It was and did dancing with it on the aisles, so it
Huh.
looked like a tornado. It was really cool.
Hmm.
So those are the two that like have been really like awesome.
Hmm.
And I've also always been into the more like positive musicals, if that makes sense. Like the darker musicals are like Year in Town, Sweeney Todd.
Yep.
Um, that's just not my jam.
Could you watch them if they're a movie? Because Sweeney Todd was a movie,
Sweeney
also.
Todd was a movie.
Yeah.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
It's just I don't think that I need to be in a musical where they're killing people.
Makes sense.
And I mean, I love those musicals, but it's just, for me, it was always a really happy place for me. And so I
Hmm.
think that the whole killing thing just kind of was like, I don't know about that. But so the big happy musicals have been my thing. Like we did High
Yeah.
School Musical, which was kind of fun.
Yeah.
A couple years after it came out, when I was in Seattle. So that was really fun. So
Hmm.
those are like really happy ones where everyone's involved.
Yeah.
Those are the ones I like.
So, in our talks leading up to this conversation, you mentioned that you get nervous, and you also, and I guess when you're uncomfortable, also I can't exactly remember the exact words you said, but you get nervous when it's just something new you're doing. What is Natalie like when she's on the stage, and then in that transition to being just a regular student?
Um, so I think that hyper focus comes into play,
Hmm.
which if I don't know if the viewers know this, but with ADHD, or most honestly most disabilities, you have the ability to hyper focus on things, and so like that's your one thing that like you forget that you have a disability, and so like that was musicals for me. Um, so it's weird. Like my nerves got worse as I got older,
Hmm.
and I think that that has a lot to do with thoughts of people judging you or the insecurities of how people are treating you,
Yeah.
or how they're going to treat you afterwards or whatever as you get into high school and middle school. So
Yeah.
I think that I got more nervous as I grew up. But at Sunset, I was always really comfortable because of the people around me. Um, all the people in the musicals were like my friends, and like and then I did some plays, or like I did a student led play.
Hmm.
And so I think that it brings out a really different side of me because I'm not like Natalie with the disability. Like I'm just Natalie.
Hmm.
Like that disability isn't there anymore. And when you're growing up and you're struggling with the disabilities, like it's just that's what you want, right? Is to know that like, oh, it's just not there right now, and I didn't
Yeah.
have to focus on it. I also did a cappella, which was also similar in that aspect. So